It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Seven o'clock in the PM on the East Coast means it is time. Well, regardless of where you are, 7 o'clock Eastern time means it is time for Fantasy Football Night in America. Welcome aboard to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show live on the Better Sports Network and exclusively on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the FFPC, aka the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown and the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. You can connect with me on the X at Eric Balkman. Want to welcome in my guest co-host for this evening. You know him, you love him. He's been on this show before. You follow him on the X at Doug Orth. That's DOUGORTH from Fantasy Football Today, FF Today, at FF_Today. Doug Orth, man. Doug, what is up? So glad to have you on here as we get set for week 8 of fantasy football.
I want to make this a yearly tradition, but I'm loving it. And you're saying that every time you say the X, I want to throw up the X like this.
Throw up the X, Des Bryant, baby. Yeah, we're throwing up the X tonight. Every time we mention that. Doug, by the way, I have to ask you. So, your X profile. If anybody goes and follows you for the first time, they'll notice on there more than 2 decades of playing high-stakes fantasy football. Still no losing seasons, right?
Still no losing seasons.
Mind blown. That's unbelievable. Congratulations to you. That is fantastic. We have a fantastic show tonight, speaking of which. By the way, if you want to get into some action going on at the FFPC, go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com, and play the FFPC Weekly Challenge. It's a fantastic contest. There is no draft. There is no salary cap. You just choose the 10 players you want or 12 players you want, depending upon if you want to play with kickers and defenses. And then that's it. Get them in by 1 o'clock and you're set. You can have fun and watch your team play through the entire weekend. Remember, only 1 player per team. There is no stacking in this. It's very similar to the FFPC World Famous Playoff Challenge, which is coming up probably for a launch in about a month and a half, 5-6 weeks away from that. $35 to enter or $200, and you can win up to $2,500. Shout out to our man behind the glass tonight, Tyler Soto, who is running the show this evening for everybody. Coming up on tonight's show, we're going to do a few things. We're going to get you set for week 8, obviously. Then coming up in the second segment, the bottom of this hour, Doug is going to help me put together the BetterCast Thursday Night Football pregame questions, which we've been, like Doug, again, I don't want to put pressure on you, but the last couple of weeks, we had Matt Ward from Broto Fantasy Football. We got into, I think, like a 3rd or 4th place finish on the night on the BetterCast. Last week, we were in first place pretty much the whole time. I should say the whole time. The entire 4th quarter, and then afterwards, but we ended up taking second. This was me and C.H. Herms from Draft Sharks. So tonight, I'll take care of the stuff that goes on during the game. When the questions pop up during the game, I'll handle that. But the pregame stuff, you're going to help me get set for. We're going to talk Stephon Diggs, Baker Mayfield, James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, a ton more. That'll be coming up in the bottom half of hour number 2. We're going to find out where Doug Orth stands on players like Dameon Pierce, Tyler Higbee, Jared Goff, and more. And then to complete stuff tonight, we're going to get into some lineup advice, starts and sits, including players like Rashee Rice, DeAndre Hopkins, Jake Ferguson, Darrell Henderson, and much more. So let's get started tonight, Doug, with Tyreek Hill. He did not practice yesterday. He did practice, I believe, in a limited fashion today. I'll have to double check that. He says he's going to be good for Sunday. I always hesitate to take the player's word for it when it comes to, how healthy they are and whether they're going to play or not. This is big because if we don't see, even if we see a limited we saw it last week, right? DK Metcalf did not practice Wednesday or Thursday, came back for a limited practice Friday, still missed, right? So now we talk about Tyreek Hill, kind of regardless, unless it's a full practice tomorrow, we don't know for sure. How confident are you in being able to start Tyreek Hill on Sunday, given that there's a chance he doesn't play, and what we saw last week with Metcalf, and knowing that if you can't play Hill, you got to make some hay on the waiver wire to make sure that you have that wide receiver spot filled.
Yeah, one of my many jobs is I get to type out the injury reports every week for USA Today. So I'll put it this way. Generally, and especially with star players like Tyreek Hill, if you can get a DNP limited, you're usually confident. And that will probably bring about a questionable tag. I can live with a questionable tag with Tyreek going into the weekend. You don't like what you heard about Tua saying when we get him back down the road or whatever, something along those lines. Yeah, that was a little bit problematic, but obviously you want to see that progression of DNP, LP, FP, and we'll see if that comes to fruition. But I would be happy with 2 limited practices at the end of the week. Obviously, you don't want to see a setback tomorrow for whatever reason, but I'm confident enough in him being available this weekend. I would always have a backup plan, but I wouldn't go crazy finding that backup plan this week.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's worthwhile, knowing that, when you consider, I know, like, I've been struggling, and this week we don't have buys, which obviously helps out, but I've been struggling trying to formulate like backup plans for some of my injured players coming into, like, it's not easy to do that. So anytime that we can get some reassurance, we feel good about it. Speaking of reassurance, I mentioned Metcalf earlier in how he didn't play this past Sunday. Tyler Lockett didn't practice yesterday. However, I'm watching footage right now from the great Greg Bell, who covers the Seattle Seahawks, showing footage of Lockett practicing today. So that's a good sign. The question here is not necessarily whether Lockett's going to play, but we saw what Jackson Smith and Jigba did last week, getting in the end zone without DK Metcalf. We think Metcalf is going to play this week. When you consider a tough Cleveland Browns defense coming to town in the Pacific Northwest, is there any trepidation maybe you have a loaded roster? I mean, there's a couple of leagues where Lockett to me would not be a slam dunk start because I have players like, for instance, Puka Nacua, right? Where I didn't plan on him, coming forward the way he has. But now all of a sudden Lockett is a guy like, okay, maybe I can get away with not starting him, not flexing him out this week because I do have a lot of good receivers. How confident do you feel not only about Lockett's health, but his ability to put up a good week this week, even if Metcalf and JSN are out there against the tough Browns defense?
Yeah, with questions like this, you want to fall back on the track record, and Lockett hasn't missed a game in a while. I trust Lockett enough to show up, at least be present and available and play his usual allotment of snaps. You mentioned having a wealth of receivers or having a wealth of depth, and that's exactly my situation in one experts league. I have both Lockett and JSN, and I'm not starting either one of them because I've got Cooper Kupp, I've got Adam Thielen, I've got, I think, Josh Palmer, and I'm Garrett Wilson, I believe. I think I'm starting all 4 of those guys over the Seattle receivers. And another thing that's problematic with what Seattle's doing is it looks like they're rotating the 3 guys. So you're not getting Metcalf with his 100% of snaps. You're not getting Lockett with 100% of his snaps. You're getting the 3 guys getting pretty close to equal snaps right now. So, or at least that's the way I think it's been since the bye. So from that perspective, that hurts me a little bit. Now I'm thinking, rather than maybe a low-end wide receiver for 1 for Metcalf, maybe now he's a mid-2. For Lockett, now he's a low-end 2, maybe he's a mid-3. And JSN, maybe a mid-lane flex, especially with matchup this week.
You had mentioned, Doug, Joshua Palmer, and this is a guy that I'm counting on in a lot of my leagues. I just see it now that he did not practice. Well, I saw yesterday he didn't practice yesterday, but he didn't practice again today. How concerned are you about Palmer not being able to gut it out and give it a go this week? Because we know there's no Mike Williams. Gerald Everett returned to practice, so obviously there's more of a safety blanket there for Justin Herbert. But when you consider this, again, anytime you have Mike Williams and or Keenan Allen out of the lineup, it should be a smash spot. It should be a golden opportunity for Joshua Palmer. And now you worry about him going out there this Sunday. How confident are you in Palmer's availability for Week 8?
Refresh my memory on what his injury is. I'm blanking right now.
Joshua Palmer is dealing with an ankle injury. And I don't believe. Yeah, it's not like a high ankle sprain. I think it was something that he just tweaked in that game in Week 7.
Yeah, Thursday, as I told you before, doing the weekly reports for USA Today, and Thursday. DNPs on Thursday are problematic. We do not like Thursday DNPs, and we don't like it when they start the week with DNP. So I'm now officially becoming a little bit concerned. I don't worry too much about anything, but if I'm counting on Josh Palmer as my wide receiver 3 or a flex, unlike Lockett, unlike Tyreek Hill, I'm starting to get a bit concerned, and I want to have a firm backup plan with Palmer.
And that's the frustrating thing is because of injuries in some of my other teams. Not that I want to turn this into a show about my other teams because no one cares, but like Palmer was a guy I was counting on, like as a third receiver or a flex play this week, and now I gotta figure that out. But that's something, again, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to alert you to this kind of stuff, you the viewer, so that you know what you need to do to accomplish to try to figure out what you're going to do going forward. Monday night game this past week, there was no Deebo Samuel. We saw the Niners drop one to the Vikings. Vikings offense was unbelievable. Kirk Cousins cut up San Francisco that night. But what I want to focus on is the Niners here, because we know Deebo Samuel is not playing again this week. So it's going to be the Ayuk, McCaffrey, George Kittle show here. When you consider that Brock Purdy, although I believe he returned to practice today, has not cleared the concussion protocol yet, it's certainly a good sign. Any trepidation in starting your San Francisco 49ers because of Purdy? Because, quite frankly, Doug, when you think about it, that might be balanced out by the fact that Deebo Samuel, the Niners don't have to worry about working him into the game plan. It should mean more for Kittle, more for Ayuk, more for McCaffrey.
The big thing now with starting your 49ers or counting on your 49ers, there's been one, and when the concussion or when he entered the protocol is important, because generally speaking, you need a day to get through each of the 5 steps. Mm-hmm. Now, I believe I first heard about it yesterday. I don't know if that's officially when he went in. If he went on Tuesday, he can return to practice and still not be anywhere close to play. He needs to get cleared by the independent neurologist and whatnot. So I trust Sam Darnold a little bit more than I with Kyle Shanahan than I did without Kyle Shanahan. But I'm thinking Shanahan wants to go into this weekend. If he knows he can't have Purdy, I think he's going to Christian McCaffrey left, Christian McCaffrey right, Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, throw in Elijah Mitchell up the middle, and repeat. So I'll still start on you, but I wouldn't be thrilled about it. Not with Darwin. And go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe we would see a little bit more Kittle in that situation. I would expect a more conservative game plan. I'll put it that way. But I'm not counting on Purdy until I get the thumbs up from Schefter on Saturday night morning.
What about? And I'll just bring this up. I thought about picking him up. Just 20-man rosters in a 12-team league for me aren't deep enough for me to pick this guy up. Juwan Johnson, is there anything there? I mean, he had a lot of targets on Monday night with no Deebo Samuel. Is there something to be said for sort of a 1-week streaming flex play for Johnson?
You mean Juwan Jennings, right?
Juwan Jennings, not Johnson. Yeah, Juwan Johnson is in New Orleans. Juwan Jennings is in San Francisco. Yes, a 1-week streaming flex play for Juwan Jennings.
In a week where there's no buys, I would have a hard time. But I was pleasantly surprised by how involved he was. Again, I'm going to fall back on if Purdy's playing, maybe a flex. If Darnold's playing, I don't want to play that game.
Yeah, the Darnold thing is just it's crazy to think about. By the way, ballpark guest, Doug, how old is Sam Darnold?
When did he come out in the draft? Like 2017?
I'm not going to give you any clues on this because I want just an absolute bare knuckle guess on this.
I'm going to say 28.
He's 26.
26
years old. I mean, I would have guessed 28 too, unless I saw it earlier, which is why I want to bring it up, because I didn't think he was that young, but he apparently still is that young, which is crazy to think about. John Glennon, who covers the Tennessee Titans, reported that Treylon Burks was a full participant in practice today. He was actually a full participant yesterday. They have a matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. Burks has missed the last 3 games due to a knee injury. he caught 6 passes for 99 yards in 3 games so far. It's been bad. It's the DeAndre Hopkins effect to a certain point. But the question here now is how flexible or how startable as a flex is Treylon Burks here, Doug, because you're not going to have Ryan Tannehill. You're either going to have Will Levis, Malik Willis, or perhaps both. God knows what Mike Vrabel is capable of, right? Treylon Burks, is he better off because he missed all this time and is coming back with a different quarterback? Is he best kept on benches with no teams on bye this week?
Benches, yeah, I would keep him on my bench. The one saving grace, and we know this having played this game, been in this hobby for 20, 30 years. Each quarterback has their favorite receiver. Now, we would tend to think that Hopkins would be everybody's favorite receiver just because of his catch radius and whatnot. But who's to say that in the time that he's spent on the practice or on the side field that he hasn't that Burks hasn't played and caught a lot of balls from Will Levis. Okay, maybe that's the connection going on there. That's the one saving grace, or that's a story I can tell myself. Again, in a week where there's no buys, I don't think you'd have to be in a pretty deep league to go flex with Burks. Additionally, Atlanta and Tennessee are basically, to me, mirror images of each other. They're going to want to see, and you know that's where Arthur Smith came from. Don't you think that Vrabel and Arthur Smith are going to want to see who can out-physical? I hate that word, out-physical the other. I see this game being like a rock fight.
Speaking of rock fights, I don't often tweet anything derogatory, but I feel like I tweeted something derogatory today about Arthur Smith. I mean, it's clear I'm not alone.
No.
I understand there is this. The primary concern for an NFL coach should be wanting to win football games.
Yeah.
Obviously, Arthur Smith has said that's what he wants to do. I'm not sure. I don't know. Like, I feel like he talks down to the media, and the fact that he brings up fantasy football so much in his press conferences, I feel like he's kind of flexing his football intelligence a little bit, and it's frustrating because not only it's different if you just want to win football games. I feel like this guy's trying to go out of his way to show that he can win football games without the services of peak Kyle Pitts, without the services of a maxed out Bijan Robinson, without the services of a heavily targeted Drake London. I don't know if it's the thing to show the world that how smart he is, but for me, it ain't working. And I feel like this guy could be in a really, really good position if he used his fantasy players more. And I'm at the point, and I don't normally do this, Doug, I'm at the point where I'm actually thinking about the Arthur Smith effect before I click start on guys like Drake London. And it's happened with Kyle Pitts. And quite frankly, now I'm not sure what to think about Bijan Robinson. I'm hoping this was just a one-off where he was sick and he couldn't fully function or whatever. But man, I don't know. And I don't know what Arthur Smith is capable of anymore. And that's the problem here.
I can't add anything to that other than I do think Bijan was a one-off. I'll leave it at that. I do think that.
And I think that's the important thing too, because like if it's a one-off, we can start him with confidence again this week, right?
Yes. Yes, but
let me rephrase.
Manage expectations.
Let me redirect, Your Honor. We can start Bijan Robinson with confidence as far as the Arthur Smith effect goes.
That's right. Parentheses.
In parentheses, yeah, exactly. But like that's the thing, and like the Titans, like it's weird because I think they've been really good against the run this year, but they've had a couple of bad games as well. And maybe it's a Robinson type game this week as well. There's a non-zero chance of that. So I read something interesting about Raheem Mostert here. Mostert did not practice yesterday. He practiced today, which was good. I mean, Tyreek Hill and him both practiced today. We love seeing that as fantasy players. Yes. Raheem Mostert, over the last 3 weeks, has touched the ball 42 times. He is 31 years old, and he's never touched the ball more than 212 times in one season. He is on pace in his age 31 year for more than 250 touches if he stays healthy. It's going to be active against New England. I would imagine Bill Belichick tries to take away Tyreek Hill. I don't know how successful that's going to be without a guy like Christian Gonzalez in the lineup.
Yeah.
But and this is a roundabout way of asking you this question, but I ran into a lot of problems this week, and I know a lot of other people probably did as well. I could have cut Salvin Ahmed for flavor of the week running backs, Amari DeMarcado, Darrell Henderson, Royce Freeman, so on and so forth. I kind of kept Ahmed around because of this Mostert thing, and we didn't, when waivers went through in a lot of high-stakes leagues last night, I didn't have the benefit of knowing what was going to happen with practice today. So I kept Ahmed on my team, but there's still the Jeff Wilson aspect to consider when this backfield is going off again. Now, you're not starting either of those players this week, but if you only have one roster spot and you want to cling on to the guy that's going to get the lion's share of the carries while Devon Achane is recovering on IR, are you keeping Ahmed on your team or are you keeping Jeff Wilson, Doug Orth?
Yeah. Based on the shares of in my 26 leagues, I believe, all managed leagues. So, but I think I have Wilson on half of them. So, yeah. Obviously, that was an IR stash. That was a purposeful IR stash back in August and early September. You in situations like this, you go with the guy that's done it before. And Wilson was pretty good. Wilson was actually pretty good when we last saw him doing this thing last year. I think he's ahead of Ahmed on the depth chart. Now it's just a matter of when McDaniel lets it happen. I'm with you. I had no confidence. I still have no confidence that Mostert's going to pull that. And
I mean, it's going to happen at some point. It has to.
Now, to his credit, and I heard this on the telecast a week or two ago, and I think I can kind of see it now. He's put on some weight since last year. He's put on some muscle since last year. We in the fantasy community tend not to like to see our runners put on weight, but I suppose at age 31, with his kind of speed, you can afford to lose a little bit of speed, and based on his GPS, he's not losing much speed. So, but to answer your question, yes, I would prefer to stash Wilson because I think it's only a matter of time before he's at worst the 1B there.
Another thing that popped up on, God, I don't know if you get the heebie-jeebies watching TJ Hawkinson play, but pretty much for his entire career, including Detroit, I mean, he looks so good, and then all of a sudden he'll limp off with a random leg or ankle or knee or shoulder or arm injury or whatever, and then you don't know what's going to happen. And then he comes back and you feel better, and then you find out after the game he's on the injury report. Now, this happened again this week where he looked like a world-beating tight end, outperforming George Kittle on Monday Night Football. He looked awesome, and then he gets hurt, and then he comes back in, and now we find out he's on the injury report with a foot injury. Estimated practice yesterday of DNP. They weren't on the field. They're on the field today. He gets upgraded to a limited participant. He gets the Green Bay Packers this weekend in Lambeau Field. Packers defense, I would say, it's an okay defense, but as far as fantasy goes, hasn't allowed a ton of massive fantasy days to players. And Hawkinson has been getting some massive fantasy days since Justin Jefferson went down. 20 targets in the last 2 weeks without JJ out there for Minnesota. How do we feel about Hawkinson this week? We know if he's out there, it's going to be tough to find somebody on the waiver wire or somebody on your bench that's going to be better than him. Are you at all concerned, Doug, about this foot inhibiting him to the point of not necessarily where he's inactive, but to the point where, man, he's just not moving the way he was on Monday night against San Francisco?
Yeah, I'm not worried about him from a matchup perspective. I'm not sure there's a bigger gap of all 32 teams. I'm not sure there's a bigger gap between the level of talent and the level of performance in the Green Bay defense.
Totally, I would agree with that. No question.
They have the linebacker play. They have decent enough safety play. They have good enough linebacker play to slow down Hawkinson. But the things I keep seeing with Hawkinson, he takes shots to the back. And I think at some point, when you take shots to the upper butt and lower back, at some point, that's going to have an effect on him. it doesn't seem that. I guess you're saying he's on the injury report with the foot, right?
Yep.
Oh, that's right. Because that's right. There was a tackle there. I think like third quarter. I remember now. But yeah, as I can hear here again, I'll use this. I'll call it the exceptions go to the stars here. If he goes limited today, limited tomorrow, I'm fine with him and his injury status going into the weekend, assuming he's not made doubtful. Because doubtful is probably, I think, questionable ends up being questionable is the new probable. And I think it's like 80 or 90% that they're going to play, not 50-50. Doubtful is almost 90 to 95% they're not going to play.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, as long as he's questionable, as long as he gets a limited practice tomorrow and a questionable tag or better, I'm not worried about his injury status.
You're playing him.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I have a lot of shares of Hawkinson, so that makes me feel really good about that for sure. Kyler Murray in the news, and this is interesting. He is no longer on the Week 8 injury report with that knee issue that had him on there the last couple of weeks. I can't imagine that he would be out there against Baltimore this week. However, he is into Week 2 of his 21-day window, where the Cardinals opened up for him when they let him practice. It certainly seems that Kyler Murray, who many people didn't think was even going to play in 2023, not only is going to play, he might get more than half the season in if he does indeed return for Week 9 next week, which would be against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. Kyler Murray, obviously, if he's out there in your waiver wire, he's probably been grabbed by now. I don't know what his ownership percentage is in the FFPC, but it's got to be up there. But Kyler Murray at this point, Doug, what are you projecting as you look into the Orth crystal ball? Is Murray going to sort of have like what Deshaun Watson experienced at the end of last season? Or is he a guy that you think that, you know what, maybe I'll roll him out there the first couple of weeks that he's healthy, or the first couple of weeks that he's active?
Chances are, if you had enough foresight to stash Murray or pick him up recently, Murray is another guy that, while the majority of people were saying I don't think he's going to play this year, I had a free IR spot in my leagues. Guess what? You're on my IR, and so I've got him in probably at least a third of my leagues. Having said that, I'm not afraid of the Deshaun Watson parallel here because first of all, not as much this time. Second of all, you're not dealing. I would, as a psychology major, I'd like to crawl into the mind of Deshaun Watson and think and see how much the public view of him is weighing on him. I don't. What we're seeing most of the time with him, 2 years away from the game doesn't explain that to me. He has fallen markedly over the last since he was in Houston. So is he carrying more out on the field than just I'm still rusty? I don't think we're at rust anymore. I think we're at he's being limited up here. So Murray's just been working back his way from an injury. Would I expect him to be great against Baltimore, against Cleveland? No, but there are leagues, and I was actually able to pull a trade for Justin Jefferson yesterday, which involved me shipping out Trevor Lawrence. And one of the reasons I did that was because I thought I could go with 1 week with Dak Prescott, who was my other quarterback, and then start counting on Murray about week 10. I'm looking at a 2-week ramp-up period, and I don't know if it's going to happen in the first 2 weeks or first month, but I do expect to get let's say low-end QB1 because we're not going to collect teams very often anymore. We're slow, traditional, but he's still going to scramble, and he's still a very good passer, at least better than Dobbs. And Dobbs had his run. To his credit, Dobbs had a nice little run there before teams started figuring out what he and Arizona was doing. But starting in week 10, I would be more apt to count on Murray as a regular starter in week 10 moving forward.
I think that's what you're hoping for if you have Kyler Murray on your squad as well. I want to get some rapid fire stuff in here with stuff that took place today, Doug, and some of this is pretty interesting. So Dalton Kincaid, the inactive lists have been announced.
Okay.
Dalton Kincaid is the only active tight end for the Bills tonight against Tampa. Dawson Knox was placed on injured reserve a couple of hours ago. Quentin Morris, the number 3 guy there, is expected to not play tonight because of an ankle injury. The Bills elevated wide receiver Andy Isabella, but that means Kincaid is the only tight end. And given how he's coming on, Doug, I wonder, and when you consider FFPC tight end premium leagues,
Yeah.
how close to a must start does this make Dalton Kincaid the way the Bills are treating not only him tonight, but their entire roster?
Tell me if you haven't heard this 1,000 times already. Given the landscape of the tight end position, go ahead. Right.
That's going to be one of my team names for next year, given the landscape of the tight end position.
So, yeah, Tampa Bay has been pretty good against tight ends. However, Kincaid's not your traditional tight end, and he wasn't getting – I didn't think he was getting used in that way last week when he started to – well, obviously when he had his best game of the year last week. So what that tells me, what the fact that he's the only tight end that's active tonight tells me is they're going pass heavy. Mm-hmm. That's what that tells me. That's the first and primary thing. That is what that tells me. I'm not so sure, given the Tampa Bay's defense, that this is his coming out party. Assuming you thought that last week wasn't his coming out party, but FFBC 0.5 per reception. We're getting close, even in tough matchups. I think we're getting pretty close to must-start territory with him.
I have to look because I didn't see this before we went on the air. I have to look at my teams during break to see how many Kincaid teams I have with him on the bench and reevaluate that. Less positive news coming out of Pittsburgh today. So Deontay Johnson did not practice today because of a hamstring issue.
Oh boy!
He missed out on 4 games this season when he was placed on IR. You guessed it, because of a hamstring issue. This is a midweek downgrade. We always, alarms go off in our heads when we hear this. At this point, Doug, and feel free to weigh in and how you see fit. But for me personally, I don't know what's going to happen with Johnson. And as a result, for any leagues I was planning on starting him, I'm looking for alternatives at this point right now, so I don't have to worry about it later in the week.
If there is one good thing, and I wouldn't consider this a good thing so much as it is a damage control thing. How about that? You got used to being without Johnson from weeks 2 to last week. Mm-hmm. Chances are you did not make massive moves in order to clear room for Deontay Johnson and have him be an alpha or be a core member of your team. Mm-hmm. If it's going to happen, it might as well happen the first week back. So at least you're not going to tear up your team or reposition your assets to a degree where you start counting on them. So I know in the leagues that I have him. Thankfully, I have a lot of Josh Downs, for example. So I can go to Josh Downs that route. But a lot of the leagues that I have Deontay Johnson, I was able to get a capable wide receiver 4 to, move him up to wide receiver 3, or in the leagues that he was already my wide receiver 4, my wide receiver 5 is in good shape as well. So, I just want to explain this to the audience here. I had to leave early today, so I didn't get to see a lot of the injury reports. I keep telling you I'm the injury report guy. I had left before a lot of the injury reports came out today, so some of this is news to me.
I want to go to the YouTube chat right now. Rubio chiming in. What are the odds of David Montgomery playing? Recent reports don't seem promising. While I would agree with that, I would say that is putting it in a positive light. I don't think Montgomery's playing this week. Any of my teams, Doug, I've already made plans elsewhere. I like Gibbs this week. I think Reynolds is too dicey to start as a flex, but I have no plans on playing Montgomery this week, right?
Yeah, the beat reporters I saw when I did a post on this on USA Today earlier today, and a couple of beat writers, Kurt Meineke and there was one other one. I think Dave Burkett both thought they were going to give him July. The bye week is next week. Makes perfect sense to rest him. this week, next week, bring him back in week 10 because they're going to ride him. They're going to ride him to the finish. So you might as well give him all the recovery time that he needs. So, and believe me, this is another guy. David Montgomery was probably my heaviest owned player this year. So it hurts. It pains me to have him out for this long.
Let's stay in the same division and talk about the same position. Roschon Johnson has cleared the league's concussion protocol. He is expected to play against the Chargers in Los Angeles this week. However, we saw some guy named D'Onta Foreman last week absolutely go ham, 3 touchdowns. He was unbelievable. And now you look at the situation that should have developed for Roschon Johnson without Khalil Herbert. Hey, 3 down back and Foreman's the change of pace guy. Doesn't seem that way anymore. And now you have to look at this situation, not only if you have Roschon Johnson, Doug, but if you have D'Onta Foreman. What are we doing with these 2 guys against the Chargers rush defense this week? Are they both playable? Neither playable? And if only one's playable, who is it?
Well, I'm going to give you the obvious answer first. The bigger the league, the more playable both of them are. Johnson is I won't say the pet project, but Johnson is the favored the new kid on the block, the one handpicked by the organization. And technically, D'Onta Foreman was too because he was brought in as free agent. My point being is they're playing on the future of Johnson. They're not playing on the future of Foreman. I would expect first week back after this much time off, I would expect Foreman to get slightly more work. But I do expect for the time that Khalil Herbert's going to be out, I would expect this to be pretty split pretty fairly with a slight lean toward Foreman this week. But I'm confident in starting both of them given the nature of the Chargers defense, but I'm not. If you have visions of 33 PPR fantasy points again, or whatever it was that Foreman had, maybe split between the 2, but I don't even think they're getting there.
And I think that's solid, and it makes sense. And Foreman probably should be the guy if you have to make a choice between the 2. Speaking of split running back backfields, Miles Sanders fully participated today. However, if you look at the season, and I was talking with Ray Chung, a guy who's won a ton of FFPC leagues on one of my other shows this week, and he said he would not be surprised to see if Chuba Hubbard is the guy who gets the lion's share of the touches, even if Miles Sanders comes back this week. Doug, how do you read this Carolina situation as they take on Houston this week? Between Hubbard and Sanders, are we closer to an even split here? Is Sanders even going to get more touches than Hubbard? What do you do from a fantasy perspective as far as starting these guys or benching them?
Okay, I think you've tapped into my trade discussions in the last week because you've really hit on a lot of guys already that I either talked about or I actually posted about the possibility of a committee on Monday. I think Monday or Tuesday when the news came out, and supposedly it was a quote taken the wrong way that basically that's what they've done the whole time is. We've always ran a little bit of a committee here. It's always been by committee. I'm sorry, is the wording. So the reason I'm telling you that I started off the trade discussion with Miles Sanders. I ended up pivoting to Zach Moss because I was looking for a 2-week fill in, and I wasn't going to get it from Sanders. That was my perspective on that. I have Sanders in one league. And I don't know when I'm ever going to start him. And I'm okay just having him as depth. That offense, even with the transition from in-play callers, because it's going from Frank Reich to the OC, whose name is Thomas Brown, formerly of the Rams. I want to believe that Brown is going to be able to open up that offense a little bit more than Reich was. But to get to your point, though, I don't know how you can not have this somewhat of a split backfield with a slight lean toward Hubbard until Sanders, A, proves he's healthy, and B, can be as productive as Hubbard. So if you're looking at, let's say, 22 touches out of that backfield, I think that's probably a little bit liberal. 22 touches out of that backfield, I would lean toward Hubbard getting 12 or 13, and I would lean toward Sanders getting maybe 10.
Yeah, and I think that's important to understand. Hubbard might be a guy that you could potentially look as a flex this week, but you can't view Miles Sanders any higher than Chuba Hubbard. So when you're setting those lineups, make sure you're keeping that in mind with the Carolina running back situation going on. We have just – go ahead, Doug.
And I just want to say, please remember how bad of an offense that has been to this point. So you're not even getting upside with that selection.
We have just scraped the surface on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show tonight here on the Better Sports Network. Much more to come, including an update on Chris Godwin that just came out about a half hour or so ago regarding his inactive active status. And even if he's active, I think there's something that we need to be talking about here. Plus the Bettercast. Now, spend the break. Go to the App Store. Go to Google Play. Download the Bettercast app for free. We're going to get through the pregame questions tonight. We're going to tell you how to win a lot of points on the app tonight. Doug Orth is going to help me. He of FF Today. I'm Eric Balkman, HSFF Hour, RotoViz, High Stakes Lowdown, the FFPC. The Better Sports Network's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the FFPC rolls on next. Don't go anywhere.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, but they let him be the quarterback for a long time, too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. I there's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl.
And
when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, yeah, well, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing, too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game that they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky, is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yards go.
I want to remind all of you viewers hanging out with us tonight to play the Bettercast during the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Buffalo Bills. That game kicks off in about 30 minutes. You can predict what's going to happen in the game to score points and win prizes. Chat with our community about all the big plays, top performers, and the bus in real time. Watch Thursday Night Football tonight with us here on Fantasy Football Night in America. Play our free contest and win tickets The more questions you answer, the more tickets you win. And then you can redeem those tickets for authentic NFL signed gear and plenty of collectibles. All you have to do is this. Download the free Bettercast app in the App Store or Google Play. You have to be 18 years or older. That's it. Download it now. We're going to get this fired up. Doug's going to help me with our pregame questions tonight. Before we do that, I do want to get into the YouTube, or excuse me, the Facebook chat right now. A couple of people that are hanging out watching us, Doug. And by the way, I'm joined by Doug Orth from FF Today. Follow him on the X at Doug Orth. So he's got a question here. Jim Parsons Jr., JPJ, DK Metcalf, Christian Kirk, or Rashee Rice. Let's rank those in order because I don't know how many he has to start. Oh, no. Yeah, I don't know how many he has to start. I would rank them this way. I think I would put I know I'd put Rashee Rice third. The question is Metcalf versus Kirk. I think I'm leaning towards Kirk number one and then Metcalf and then Rice. How do you see that situation, Doug?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I think Rice is closer to Metcalf than we wanted to admit right now, especially given the matchups. But yeah, I would go Kirk, Metcalf, and Rice. And the thing I would say, and I'll make this short and sweet. There was a tweet, I believe it was Graham Barfield last night or recently. He mentioned, and I hate to bring in Calvin Ridley to this discussion, but the Steelers play a lot of single high safety, and this should be a Ridley game. With that said, that also we've seen over the last 6 weeks, every game is almost Christian Kirk game at this point because Ridley's running a lot of clear out routes for Kirk to get Kirk open. So anyway.
Let's get to the second part of his question here. Running backs. He's got an issue where let's rank the running backs. We just talked about several of these guys: Miles Sanders, Alexander Mattison, and Deontay Foreman. I would put Sanders third, actually, especially based on what you were sharing about Chuba Hubbard and Sanders. So then it comes down to Mattison or Foreman for 1 and 2. Mattison this week is at Green Bay. Foreman is at the Chargers. Because of the I don't know. Like, we can get in the Cam Akers discussion. We probably will later on in the show. But it's very razor sharp between these two. I guess I would lean towards Foreman over Mattison. But, man, you ask me tomorrow, I might say Mattison over Foreman. So I'll say Foreman, Mattison, Sanders is how I'd rank them this week.
We're of the same mind here, and I think you spelled it out beautifully, so we can move on.
Last part of his question, Taysom Hill or Jake Ferguson. Juwan Johnson should be back this week, Doug. I think that's going to eat into Taysom Hill, who was getting a ton of targets while Johnson was out. I'm going to put Ferguson above Taysom Hill.
Same, exactly. You're doing the rationale for me.
We are dialed in tonight. We're galaxy braining this right now together. Mehul Patel has a flex question here. Chris Godwin, Kendrick Bourne, Derrick Henry, and Najee Harris. We have to pick 2 of those. Now, I bring up the Chris Godwin aspect because Godwin's was on the injury report questionable as with a neck injury. There is a possibility that he may not be on the field as much as we've been, becoming accustomed to with Godwin. And he might be a little bit risky tonight than he normally would be. So to that end, I am going to say that I would still put Henry 1. I think I'm going to put Godwin 2 here, and then I'm assuming PPR, at least half PPR. So I'm going to go Henry, Godwin. I think I go Harris and then Bourne. But I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not a Najee Harris guy. I could easily start Bourne over Harris this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. Henry's number 1 for me. And then where you put Godwin is up to your risk tolerance. And probably, I hate to be the whole cliche, are you favored in your matchup? Do you think you're favored in your matchup? Do you think you're not at all? If you think you're a favorite, then I would probably play Godwin. If I'm not, Bourne's been getting enough work here lately, and I think the Patriots have come around to him being the lead receiver. So as long as that remains the case, I personally would probably go, knowing what we know about Godwin, I think the 4 options here are all. Henry's very good, a very good option. The other 3 are good enough options that I don't need to risk it with Godwin. I would play Godwin if he was healthy. I would play Godwin ahead of those guys, but that's not the case. So I'm going to go after him. I'm going to go Bourne, Harris, Godwin.
I think the last part of the question here to me is I don't want to say easier, but he's got a tight end question here. Tyler Higbee is at Dallas. He's also got Chiga Okonkwo, who is playing this week against the Falcons. And then he also has Hayden Hurst. He's got to pick one of those guys. Yuck, yuck, yuck. I don't like any of those guys this week, unfortunately. I'm sorry. But I'm going to roll with, I think, Higbee first here. I'm gonna start him and then probably Okonkwo and then Hurst. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the only reason, and we were talking about, this is what we were talking about earlier, or this is what I was talking about earlier, where you never know when you bring a new quarterback in who he's going to lean on more. I could tell myself a story and say that Okonkwo is going to be the best of those three. I'm going to fall back on what we know, who we can rely on the most in this particular case, and I'm going to go in the same order that they're listed here: Higbee, Chig, and Hurst. And the reason I'll do that. The reason that Hurst is an easy 3 for me, Adam Thielen is basically running a lot of the routes and operating in the same area that Hurst would be operating. I think they brought in Hurst with the idea that he was going to be a 50 catch guy, but Thielen has basically commanded that area of the field.
The last thing I'll bring up here is Rubio. Who would we start? Chuba Hubbard, Gus Edwards, or Latavius Murray? He points out that Vita Vea is inactive for the Buccaneers tonight. Does that upgrade Latavius Murray at all? To me, not enough. Chuba Hubbard is the guy I play here, and I would play Gus Edwards before Latavius Murray.
Yes, exactly. And Vita Vea being out is a big idea, is a big part of this. And I don't know if we're going to get to some prop bets down the road with James Cook. I would go from, if I was betting the under on Cook's rushing yards before, I'm going over now. Vea being gone there is a big deal.
Our buddy Chris Lude checking in on YouTube tonight. Gabe Davis, would you start him over T. Higgins, Tyler Lockett, or Rashee Rice? He has to start one. Okay, so I would start Gabe Davis over Higgins. I would start him over Rashee Rice. I don't think I could start him over Lockett. I would play Lockett over Gabe Davis. Doug, how are you seeing that?
This will be one of the first times that we disagree here. Oh, wow. I'm going to try to avoid Lockett. Lockett would probably be the last guy I'd start believing or not.
Really?
In that group. I'm feeling risky here. I would put him in this order: Rice, Davis, Higgins, Lockett.
Rashee Rice, Gabe Davis, T. Higgins, Tyler Lockett is how you would have them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean, like, what? Why do you have? Is it the injury, or what is it about Lockett that has you putting him fourth on this list?
Yeah, the rotational snaps, number one. The injury is part of it too, and the matchup. So I think we got the three-headed monster there working against Lockett. That does not mean that I don't mind starting Lockett. If I have Lockett, I don't mind starting him. I just don't think the upside is there this week.
All right, I promised it. It's going to happen. Let's go through our BetterCast pregame questions right now, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going to kick things off with one Mike Evans. More or less than 56.5 receiving yards for Evans tonight. And bear in mind, Doug Orth, that Chris Godwin is dealing with a neck injury. This could be a big night for Evans. I lean towards going over the 56.5 with Mike Evans. What say you?
I agree.
All right, so we're going to go over on Mike Evans. Perfect. Next question is Stephon Diggs. More or less than 86.5 receiving yards. That's a lot of yards, but we know Tampa has given up some big wide receiver games over the course of the season. And we do know that Stephon Diggs is about as dialed in as you can be on this offense right now. No Dawson Knox. So obviously Kincaid, Gabe Davis, James Cook, and Diggs should all eat a little bit more than they had, given that Knox was still getting a significant amount of targets. I actually lean towards over on this one as well.
The reason I was looking over to the side here, I was pulling up Diggs' game board. 5 out of 7 times it's been over 100 yards. The other 2 times were 66 and 58. I have a lot of respect for Tampa Bay's secondary. With that said, when you're getting 10 and 12 targets on a regular basis and you have the skill and the talent, I should say, just the talent of Diggs. I wouldn't want to make this prop bet, but if I was going to, it would be over.
All right, we're going over. I love it. Over on everything so far. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, next question here, Doug. Rashad White. Now, here's one I will go under. More or less than. This is not combined yards. This is solely rushing yards. 46.5. Buffalo pretty stout against the run. Rashad White hasn't been lighting it up on the ground. I lean towards the under here.
Again, we're in lockstep.
Okay. All right, we're going under on Rashad White. Dialed in. Perfect. Okay, and the next one is now James Cook. Talked about a little bit earlier. His total for rushing yards only set at 50.5. Now, if we look at the point spread on this game tonight, the Bills have gone up to a 10-point favorite. This is a positive game script for James Cook. However, Bills don't seem to want to run the ball or be able to run the ball. I don't know how much of a positive game script this is for James Cook in a traditional or in a non-traditional sense, because he is used in a non-traditional way in this Buffalo offense. I really don't know on this one. Do you have a feeling one way or the other?
I have a slight lean toward the over. The problem being is that, let's say the game plays out like Vegas thinks it's going to. He's going to have to get it all in the first 3 quarters, because I think it's going to be heavy Latavius Murray after that. So if you're Vea being out helps immensely, and that's why I'm going over. If he was active, I would have said under, more than likely. But I think we can count on probably, let's say it was 50.5. I think we can count on 12 carries. I think we can count on at least 12 carries for James Cook here, and I would be willing to make him go 4.5 yards per carry against a Vita Vea less defense. So I'll go slightly over, but yeah, I'll go over.
All right, so we'll go over because I don't have a good feeling on this, so I'm trusting you. And even you are kind of like, Bulky, yeah. I don't know on this one. We'll go over, and we'll go with God on that one because who knows what's going to happen. Let's shift to the quarterbacks here. Baker Mayfield, more or less than 228.5 passing yards. You would think he'd be throwing in the second half. We know he's dinged up a little bit. We know Chris Godwin is dinged up a little bit. I should bring up, and this is what I should have done this with the other guys too, and I failed to do it, so I do apologize. But I want to bring up what Baker Mayfield has done so far this season from the standpoint of how many passing yards he's had in each game. Now, 228.5 is what it's set at on the BetterCast, which you can download for free in the App Store and Google Play. He has hit that number 3 times this year, but he's missed that number 4 times. Where do you stand on 228.5 tonight?
Yeah, I'm going slightly under. I guess the Godwin news helps, or at least if Godwin's not playing a full lot of snaps, I like Trey Palmer, for example. I like what Tampa Bay has in reserve, but even if we say Mike Evans gets to 80 or 90 yards, I don't. And let's say Rashad White has another 30 or 40. I don't like the supporting cast to get pushed Mayfield over the top. So under for me.
So under on Mayfield at 228.5. Let's shift to the other quarterback and Josh Allen, who is sitting at 264.5, not total yards, but passing yards tonight. Excuse me. Where do you sit on this when you consider that in order to get over, he's got to hit 264.5, a total that he has hit a bunch this year, actually. 4 times Josh Allen has hit that, although bear in mind his last outing, he made it by a half yard. 265 against New England, 359 against the Jags, 320 against the Dolphins, 274 against the Raiders. Everybody's healthy on this team except for Dawson Knox. 264.5. Does he hit that tonight, Doug?
I told you before I have respect for the Tampa Bay defense, and Buffalo hasn't shown me enough with any kind of rhythm and consistency to make me feel confident. So I could see them running out to like a 10-point lead after 3 quarters. And so just like James Cook, I think Allen's going to have to do the bulk of his work in the first 3 quarters. So I'm going under.
Under is what we're saying with Josh Allen. And let's move on here to some fun ones. Now, as we're trying to acquire points on the BetterCast, we would get 25 if we say Josh Allen scores a rushing touchdown, and he does. Now, if we say he does not score a rushing touchdown and he doesn't, we get 10 points. So it's basically 2.5 to 1 if he scores a touchdown here. Is that something that we're willing to bet on here? Josh Allen running one in against this Tampa defense tonight.
I'm looking at his game log. 4 out of the last 5 he scored rushing touchdown, and I didn't consider this. I didn't consider Vega being out when I was looking at this earlier. I said no. I'm going to stick with no, but that's a 50-50 proposition for me.
Now, if it's 50-50, excuse me, if it's 50-50, given that we're getting 2.5 times more, if we say yes, shouldn't we say yes on here? You know, if it's basically a coin flip, the odds would dictate that we should say yes, because we get the bigger amount of points, right?
Are you trying to sway the road?
I'm not. Listen, you say it, like whatever you say, I will go with. I'm just pointing it out.
Yeah, I don't think there's the rushing touchdowns that are going to be plentiful tonight anyway.
Okay. All right, we're locking in no, Doug. We are locking in no on that.
I hate myself already. That
well, come on, no, we're standing with our convictions. We're going with our convictions tonight. Dalton Kincaid, does he score a touchdown? Same odds. Yes, we get 25 points. No, we get 10 points if it's right. Kincaid, you said the rushing touchdowns aren't going to happen, or they're not going to be plentiful. What about a Kincaid touchdown, given everything we've already talked about, this tight end potentially having another breakout game tonight?
Yeah, apparently I'm two-putting everything into the hole this because I'm going for the small amounts, not the big amounts here. No TD for me.
No TD for Dalton Kincaid. Okay. Now, last couple questions here. Let's talk about the total. BetterCast has it set at 43.5. That's what I'm seeing for the odds right now as well. Bills 43.5. Total at 43.5. Are you feeling the under or the over? I get the feeling you're feeling under on this game.
I am. I traditionally don't like Thursday games. I hate to predict offense in Thursday games as it is. Maybe that's more of a. I don't have scientific proof to back that up, and then I'm looking at Josh Allen's game log and the scores that come along with it, and they're over 45 quite fairly frequently. But again, I haven't seen enough in that offense, and Tampa Bay is not going to get them in this is not going to be a shootout type game. Granted, you don't need to have a shootout to get over 44, but I can easily see this being a 24-17 game, and that gets us to 41.
And yeah, it does not get us to 43.5, so we are going under. Now, which team will win the game? Now, this is interesting. You only get 10 points if you choose the Bills, and you're right. But if you choose the Buccaneers and you're right, you're still only getting 10 points, and the Bills are 10-point favorites. We'd be foolish to take the Buccaneers here, right? We have to take the Bills.
Yes, we'd be foolish. Go Bills.
Go Bills. Locked in. Last question.
Plus, I live closer to New York, so might as well.
Perfect. Yes. This is another one. Which team will score first tonight? We don't get any odds on this. We get 10 points if it's Bucks. We get 10 points if it's Bills. Again, given the point spread, given what we've talked about tonight, I feel like we have to say Bills here again.
Agreed.
Okay. We are locked in on the Bills scoring first, and our pregame questions are loaded in thanks to the help of FF Today's Doug Orth. If you want to play along with me and all the other BetterCast people, download the BetterCast app free in the App Store and Google Play right now. We will have, those are just the pregame questions. Kickoff is in about 10 minutes. There's going to be more questions throughout the broadcast tonight, and the winner is going to walk away very happy with a boatload, probably a 4-figure outcome of points tonight that you'll be able to spend on signed NFL memorabilia and collectibles and more. Remember to download the BetterCast app for free in the App Store and Google Play. As the NFL readies for kickoff on Thursday Night Football, we are getting ready to quiz Doug Orth on certain players on where he stands on them, including, but not limited to, KJ Osborne, Dameon Pierce, Luke Musgrave, and more. It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the FFPC on the Better Sports Network. He's Doug Orth from FF Today. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Hour number 2 gets underway next.
I like to eat my feelings. So when I'm like super sad, single serving pint sizes of Ben and Jerry's. I just start shoveling that in, and it makes me feel bigger and better. But so let's eat our feelings here. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna talk football players, food. We're gonna pair them up. Who is represented by what food? All right, I want to just shout out Hal Alexander in there for CMC. Christian McCaffrey is Rocky Road ice cream. A little bit of everything.
Yeah,
does it?
Good Hal.
I like it, man. You know it. I love me some Rocky Road ice cream. Bijan Robinson prime rib. You know what? Bijan Robinson prime rib with a baked potato and some cream spinach on the side. That's what I'm talking about. That is the King's dinner. And Bijan Robinson, I don't care if the dude from The Athletic says only 301, touches. You know what? In honor of Card Sharks, I'm going to say, guys, that I think that number is going to be a little bit higher there for Bijan Robinson. So get your knife, get your fork, you got your steak, you got your Bijan.
Yeah, that's what's up. You're on death row, and they say you get one last meal, and you just say Bijan Robinson.
Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I'm totally down with that. Love it.
I got to jump in on one real quick because Mr. Scamper said Kareem Hunt is candy corn, and I actually had a player, Tyler Boyd, was going to be candy corn for me, and basically it's that nobody likes it, but it's always there. It's always there, and somebody always puts their hand in and grabs some and has some, and they're like, well, and afterwards they're like, why did I eat that? That's Tyler Boyd. He always gets drafted, and he's just kind of there, and nobody knows why. Nobody knows why they take him. Nobody knows where it comes from. Where does the candy corn even come from? Like, it's just there. It's just there.
Past the top of the hour here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Hey, as a reminder, the FFPC Weekly Challenge is here for Week 8 in the NFL. There is no draft. There is no salary cap. There's no convoluted rules. It's the same format as our ever-popular FFPC world-famous playoff challenge. 10-team contests, 30-team contests, 100-team contests. You just pick your players and let them ride them out for the weekend. The results are determined by the total points accumulated by each individual entry. There's classic format available with kickers and defenses, or you can play the slim format with no kickers and defenses. Enter for $35, enter for $200, and you can win up to $2,500. There's a contest there for everyone. New users will get $25 off their first FFPC entry of $35 or more. That's with alarm promo code ALARM, ALARM, at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Doug Orth from FF Today joining me tonight, hanging out on a Thursday night fantasy football night in America here on the Better Sports Network. So let's get into some of these where do you stands. I want to find out where you stand on certain players. One of the most, I don't want to say pleasant surprise, but I guess one of the biggest standout running backs we have seen. It's not a guy that was drafted in the first round, not a guy that was drafted in the second round. It's been Travis Etienne, and he has been eating big time this year, Doug. One of the best fantasy football running backs. There are some detractors, some haters, as the kids would say, saying that he can't keep this up all season. And I know a lot of his production has been based on touchdowns. But where do you stand on Travis Etienne? Are we going to see what we've seen in the first 7 weeks? Is that going to continue, or is there a regression in the mean coming for Etienne?
Yeah, I'll try to keep my answer short and sweet in this series of these series of names here. I believe it's 7 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. It's something along those lines. It's to me, I'm conflicted with him because I believe Pro Football Reference has him with 17 broken tackles, which up until, would you believe Najee Harris is second with 14? But my point being is Travis Etienne is far and away. Up until last week, because Najee Harris had 6 broken tackles just last week as well. That's what got him up there. But my point being is Etienne is pretty much far and away the broken tackle leader according to Pro Football Reference this year. You look at that, and then you see he's 4 yards a carry. which tells me if you're breaking that many tackles and you're still averaging 4 yards a carry, which means you're not getting much help from your offensive line. And so, as much as I like ETN the player, and as much as they're relying on him, yes, I think there's going to be a regression to the mean, a negative regression coming shortly. I don't see him getting up to 15 or 16 touchdowns for the season.
And the thing is, like, if from a season-long perspective, you're playing him every single week. You're not benching him for anybody, but you have to understand that there might be a regression coming. Yeah. And if you are in a league where you can trade, I mean, obviously you can't do that in the main event with the FFPC or the Fantasy Pros Championship, but if you can trade, this might be a good opportunity to cash out on ETN, get what you can, and maybe have a Bafo second half of the season coming in with whoever you flip him for. Alvin Kamara has been a guy that has been unbelievable since he's come back. And when I say unbelievable, I mean unbelievable is short for underwhelming and yet totally believable, because this guy has put up some crazy numbers because of all the checkdowns going on in New Orleans. And as a result, he has been one of the best fantasy football running backs out there for high-stakes purposes. But, Doug, I was joking with Herms about this last week on the show, and I said, well, he's not going to catch 13 passes again tonight against Jacksonville. That's not going to happen. Well, he caught 12. That was darn close to 13. And I guess I want to say this can't keep up, but at the same time, I'm not seeing really a reason that it wouldn't keep up. I don't know about 13 or 12 catches, but certainly 7, 8, 9 catches a week. Why not, right?
Exactly. I'll throw this little nugget out at you. Of course, we know he missed the first 2 games of the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's 21st in the league in receptions. How about
and that's across all positions. All positions. Oh,
yes, 21st.
It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, to be more specific. So, yeah, he has 50 yards in every game so far, 50 rushing yards in every game, and of course we're talking about a 10 plus target ceiling. So, as long as the Saints keep letting pass rushers come in unabated, we're going to keep seeing 8 and 10 catch games. And Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Jawan Johnson, Taysom Hill, all those guys are going to suffer as a result.
You know, in drafting season, Doug, there is a player that I was a little upset I didn't get more of. And as the season's gone on, I no longer am I upset about not having more Dameon Pierce. He's been kind of underwhelming. Less than 300 yards on the ground, only 1 touchdown, fewer than 10 catches as we head into week 8. And I think that there was a narrative out there that stated, look what Dameon Pierce did this past season. And that was when who was the other cat they had in the backfield? Burkhead was back there gobbling up a lot of catches last year.
At least early on, yeah.
Right, early on, yeah. And I felt like, okay, this could be a big way for Pierce to step forward. He hasn't done it. Now, does that mean he's not going to do it the rest of the season? Not necessarily, but where do you personally stand on Dameon Pierce here on October 26, 2023?
It's popular for analysts, and I don't like to do the popular thing, but I'm going to in this case. The projected week 1 offensive line that Houston was supposed to have never happened, and it's not going to happen because the left guard, who's Kenyon Green, I believe, who sucked last year, but he was projected starting left guard at the beginning of the season. Juice Scruggs, who's the center, rookie center, I don't think he's played yet. You just got Laramie Tunsil back not too long ago. You just got Titus Howard back. Those are the bookend tackles. The first month was basically a wash because he had 3 or 4 starting offensive linemen missing. With all that said, he's not the same runner, and you can say, well, if he doesn't have the same offensive line, he's probably not the same offensive. He's not the same runner. Well, it did. I go back to last year about this time they played the Eagles on Thursday night, and it didn't matter that he didn't have an offensive line. He powered right through the Eagles in that game. He was all been Superman in that game. So I think we're seeing what happens to a guy who didn't have a huge workload in college. He came in, had a huge workload his first year, and now you get a situation where he's probably, I won't say he's still suffering from the effects of last year, but no, I was with you there too. I was disappointed I didn't get more of him, and now I'm glad that I don't have to worry about that.
Right,
decision.
yeah. And go ahead.
With that said, I'm glad they're playing Carolina this week. This may be the best time to sell is after this week.
I feel like over the course of this show during the season, which, we've done 7 of them right now, one of the things that I keep coming back to, Doug, is Jahan Dotson. And for lack of a better way to phrase the question, what the heck is going on with Dotson this year? This is a guy that a lot of high-stakes players towards the end of drafting, not even towards the end, like once the calendar turned towards like August, really, I saw Dotson going up in drafts, to the point where he was almost rivaling Terry McLaurin for the first Commanders receiver off the board. Now, that did happen in a few drafts, but it wasn't the ADP. The ADP still had McLaurin ahead of Dotson, even at the end of the season. But holy cow, he has been awful. I know it's not all his fault. Certainly there's some Sam Howell blame to go around. What's going on with Dotson this year, and how likely is it that he's going to be able to turn this around where this might be a good buying opportunity for Jahan Dotson right now?
So a lot of his ADP and the good feeling surrounding him last year was pretty much an unsustainable touchdown rate. I don't want to blame it just on that, because he's not. If you compare to, at least as of last week, you compare what he was doing last year at this time to this year at this time, it's not that far off, but it's the touchdowns that are missing. There has been ample opportunity in that Washington pass game. I think Washington's passed more than any other team this year. I think I read that somewhere. I didn't research that, but I think I read that somewhere. There's been ample opportunity. Fortunately or unfortunately, McLaurin is now over the toe issue that dogged him there at the end of preseason, the beginning of the regular season. Curtis Samuel stayed healthy all year. Logan Thomas has only missed 1 game. So there's been more of a ability to balance things out, and maybe that's a Eric Bieniemy, offense coordinator. Obviously, Eric Bieniemy directive is that we're going to spread things out. If you remember what Kansas City did last year, that was more of a spread the wealth offense than 2. I don't know if that's something that he's pushing for, but first of all, I blame the unsustainable touchdown rate last year, and secondly, I blame the more of the spread the wealth approach with the new offense coordinator.
Another thing that has happened since Justin Jefferson went down was the rise of KJ Osborne as far as FFPC players are starting them in their starting lineups in the main event Fantasy Pros Championship. When you look at KJ Osborne, you saw him get 6 targets. He catches 5 of them for 47 yards against San Francisco. 5 targets. He gets 4 catches for 48 yards the week before that against the Bears. And then against the Chiefs, 9 targets, 5 catches, 49 yards. He is 47, 48, 49 the last 3 weeks, and either 4 or 5 catches. Is this just what we're expecting from him going forward in full PPR leagues, where we're just going to expect him to get right around 10 points per game? Or is there more to KJ Osborne with Jefferson, as long as Jefferson's out, Doug?
Yeah. He's a good enough vertical threat that he's going to pop one of these times, but predicting that when he's going to pop is going to be the problem. And we've seen him pop in the past. Unfortunately, back then, they didn't have Hawkinson. They didn't have Addison, right? They had an aging Adam Thielen and a relatively new Justin Jefferson at that point. So even with Jefferson down right now, you've still got 2 what could be considered target hogs, and then you got Osborne. So Minnesota's going to have to get into a situation where they're probably I mean, they threw 45 times on Monday. They might have to get into a situation where they're throwing 50, 55 times before you get Osborne to the point where, okay, I like that wide receiver. I like the volume. I like the yardage. I think this is what Osborne is. It's going to be 7, 8 times out of 10.
I think the issue I've had with the Vikings this year was, they won so many one-score games last year, Doug, and I felt like, okay, there's a heavy regression in the mean coming this year, obviously. And it started that way this season with the Vikings. Didn't they lose their first 3 games? And it wasn't looking great. And Vikings fans were like, oh, we need to trade Cousins. We need to trade Danielle Hunter and all this other nonsense. And then obviously Jefferson went down. Well, they've come back and they've looked pretty good. I think they're 3-4 right now on the season as they come into Green Bay this week, as I think they're a favorite. If they're not, it's very, very close. And they could get back to 500 here. I expected the Vikings defense to be so bad that Cousins is going to throw the ball all over the place. And while that's happened, it hasn't necessarily meant a boon for KJ Osborne. And that could change, as you alluded to. It's possible. He threw the ball a ton against San Francisco. Obviously, a lot of it went to Addison. Some of it could be going to Osborne going forward. Tyler Higbee is a player that I've always liked, a player that you can always draft as your starting tight end after literally everybody else has one, or maybe you wait on tight end in the FFPC, you grab him as your second tight end. That's fine too. This season's been kind of weird. He's had 2 games with more than 6 targets. Every other game he's gotten 5 or less. In fact, most of the time it's been 3. He's had 2 games with 5 catches. Other than that, he's had 3 or less every other game. Has not gotten into the end zone yet. I feel like Puka Nacua is taking a lot away from what Higbee would normally be doing this year, which is good for the Rams, not really great for Higbee. And to me, it's like he's a difficult guy to stream even at this point. Where do you stand, Doug Orth, on Tyler Higbee right now?
One of the big changes, and maybe not changes, but upgrades. Let's go upgrades. One of the big upgrades I did with my projections this year is put much more consideration on the different number of players that would have to compete for a similar level of ball. What do I mean by that? Behind the line of scrimmage, 0 to 9 yards, 10 to 19 yards, 20 plus. So behind the line of scrimmage, short, intermediate, and deep. When you have somebody like Puka Nacua, who's basically owning, and now you get Cooper Kupp in there too, but when you have Puka Nacua owning that short to, let's say, short, intermediate level of the field, the need to throw tight end screens to Higbee aren't there anymore. So it's not so much that Higbee's fallen off the map. He is. I think he's 30 years old now. It's not so much that he's fallen off the map talent-wise, or that his skills are eroding. It's just that there's more players now competing for the same level of ball that he's used to getting. And if you look at what Stafford's thrown less than 30 times each of the last 2 games. So once you get Kupp and once you get Nacua their targets, you don't have many targets left.
The update from the game, Buccaneers ended up punting on the opening drive. The Bills are going to have it 1st and 10 from their own 4-yard line after the Camarda actually pinned the Buccaneers back. 2 pass completions for Baker Mayfield on the first drive. They both went to Trey Palmer. 2 catches for 15 yards for him. Rashad White with a 6-yard carry. At commercial right now, the Bills are going to come back and try to put a drive together with 12:35 to go in the first quarter. I'm a Packers guy, Doug. I'm not sure if you knew that. I live in Northeast Wisconsin. Yes. Follow the team very closely. Very excited coming into the season. Not necessarily because I thought the Packers were going to be Super Bowl contenders, but because there was a freshness to the team this year. With Jordan Love, with Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, and Romeo Doubs to a certain point, and obviously Luke Musgrave as well. Musgrave is a guy I was pretty high on this year. I feel like he's been worked into the offense. A couple of things working against him. One, his fault. The other, not his fault. One, he's not breaking any tackles. He's going down on first contact. We kind of knew that from his days in the Pac-12. This is kind of who he is. Number 2, he's been athletic enough to get open, and he's been catching passes. He does drop some. That's just kind of who he is, right? Like, he drops passes. The issue I have with Musgrave is he's been hurt, like, with kind of freak stuff, right? Concussion once. He left the game this past week after a vicious hit from Kareem Jackson. He was in a walking boot, but he's out of the walking boot, did not practice today. I still remain hopeful of him long term. Jordan Love is involving him in the offense. Where do you stand on Luke Musgrave from the standpoint of being a high-stakes FFPC owner where you get 1.5 per catch in these tight end premium formats?
Well, obviously keep listening to what we're saying, but go to FFPC, and if you have space, pick up Tucker Kraft. From what I understand, I believe, I don't know if it was a LaFleur quote or not, but he said something about we're going to see a lot of Tucker Kraft this week, which tells me that Musgrave probably isn't playing, or if he's going to play, it's not going to be much. You were saying, and I think you were spot on with what you said with Musgrave back at Oregon State. The things that he was at Oregon State, he is now. He also was injured a lot at Oregon State, and I'm not one of those people. I don't believe in injury prone, but there are things that a player does enough to expose themselves or open themselves to becoming injured more often. And I think that's in that case. In this case, I think that's what is happening. All I heard about this offseason was how athletic and how many snaps Musgrave was going to play and how athletic he was. And we've seen all that. We've also seen an extension of all the bad stuff he was in college too.
And Musgrave too is like, he's one of those tight ends that's sort of like redefining what the tight end is in the NFL, as far as rookies at least go. When you have this class with, Mayer and Kincaid and Laporta, who's been the standout of this class, and you throw Musgrave into that as well. It's very exciting, given it's one of the toughest positions to sort of slip into once you get to professional football, and yet at the same time, these guys are making it look a lot easier than it probably is. Sky's the limit for these guys in 2024 and going forward. All four of them. Very excited about these rookie tight ends going forward.
Fantasy and reality needed this class to come in. Hopefully,
yes.
Go ahead.
No, you're totally accurate. We did. Everybody did. I had a question. So I do another local fantasy football show here in Wisconsin, and my co-host asked me today. He was offered this trade, and he said, I turned it down, but I feel like I made a mistake, but I'm not so sure. He has Jared Goff, and he got offered a deal for Justin Herbert. Straight up. He would get Herbert. He'd just have to give up Goff. He decided against the deal. I said, look, man, I can make the argument why you shouldn't make the deal. But if it's me, I would have made that deal. I think Herbert is a guy that's going to continue to ascend. It's a much more wide open passing offense. I understand St. Brown and Laporta have been very good, and obviously Gibbs there too. I don't know about Jameson Williams. I think he might be on the outside looking in of not being a bust at this point. But I would have done that deal. However, when you consider Jared Goff, dude has hit at least 210 yards every single game this season. He's thrown 11 touchdown passes in 7 games against 4 interceptions. He is quietly having a really good season. I know you probably would have made the trade, but where do you stand on Jared Goff going forward, Doug Orr?
That trade is closer than you could have ever imagined it being 2 months ago, or even a month ago. I have several thoughts. My first thought being, how long is Herbert's hand going to be an issue?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. I would go on with the Herbert side, but here's the case I would make for Goff. I haven't looked at the schedule, but I'm pretty sure from now until the end of at least the fantasy season, I believe Goff only has one more outdoor game. So if you're of the belief that Goff is what the kids, I hear some of the kids call an indoor cat. If you buy into that narrative, I'm not sure I do, but we're seeing enough of the to back that theory, I guess. And plus, that offense is going to hum. I mean, you get Montgomery back, you're going to have and I know it doesn't matter necessarily who you have in the backfield. People are going to respect play action, but it doesn't hurt to have a good running back, to have the linebackers biting up on play action. So my point being is, as long as that running game is humming, and this year's Lions remind me so much of the Todd Gurley and early Jared Goff Rams. Play action, run, play action, run, play action. And You're not going to throw a lot of interceptions running that offense. And you're going to get a lot of those good numbers, those 68, 69, 70% completion, 2 touchdowns, a lot of 2-touchdown games, no interception games. And I want Herbert for the upside, but that's not to say that Goff doesn't have any, because he certainly does. I'm just going to believe that Herbert stacks together more 3 or 4 touchdown games than Goff does. That would be my rationale.
I can't remember if I told you this last year, but in a lot of my leagues, I would wait on quarterback, and I would only draft 1 quarterback, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of came back to bite me, and I changed my philosophy on that this year. Now, in more than a couple leagues last year, Doug, the quarterbacks that saved me were players like Jared Goff, who we just talked about, and then Geno Smith, a guy who had a fantastic 2022. And then when I think about adding Jackson Smith and Jigba onto this roster, you had the 2 rookie tackles last year with a year under their belt. You would think that they would take a step forward. Smith and Jigba to pair with Metcalf, or to go with Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, along with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. I mean, that's a lot of weapons on this offense. Should have been wheels up for Geno Smith this year. Instead, he's at 1,400 yards. He's failed to hit 120 yards 2 games this season, 7 touchdowns in 7 weeks, 4 interceptions. Where do you stand on Geno Smith? Is this going to get better for him? I wanted to start him this week because of if Brock Purdy doesn't play, right? Which, I mean, we'll see what happens there. But Geno Smith was my backup for not only my Purdy teams, but for my Justin Fields teams. I went elsewhere looking for a quarterback this week because I don't know if Smith is a really good start against Cleveland, even at home.
Okay, how much time do you have?
We got time. We can unpack this Geno Smith thing.
So, okay, yeah. I think it's a simple question with a fairly complex answer, but I'll just give you a couple of things that pop in my mind. Week 1, you lose both starting offensive tackles. Mm-hmm. You get the one back. You get Charles Cross back. I believe was it last week or the week before. I don't think Abe Lucas is still back yet. I believe Jake Curran is the guy replacing him, and I think he's doing all right. But when you take from one piece of the offensive line, you usually lose from another. And I believe the offensive line play, especially having bookend tackles gone for a month, did not help matters. Secondly, Jackson Smith and Jigba, we know about the wrist injury, the preseason wrist injury. I believe that they wanted to be a 11 personnel team right away, and the wrist injury not only set Smith and Jigba back in terms of hitting the ground running, but it was going. I think at that point, Seattle decided, or maybe had it decided for them, that they were going to wait until after the bye to start ramping up 11 personnel and start ramping up JSN's role in the offense. I have a lot of Smith. I'm with you. I have a lot of Geno myself. I kind of like Damian Pierce. That's somebody I wanted to have a lot more of, and then now I'm looking back and I'm glad that I don't have as much as I was hoping for. But is it going to get better? I do believe. I'm not going to bet on it this week because they got Cleveland, and just because Cleveland did kind of relatively laid an egg against the Colts last week, giving up 2 rushing touchdowns in Minshew and another one or 2 through the air. Don't think that's going to happen very, very often moving forward. So I'm not counting on a breakout game for him this week. He had his breakout in week 2. He had a huge game against Detroit in week 2, but that's pretty much the only time he's really came through for us. I do believe it will get better. You get the offensive line healthy. You get JSN running the routes, majority routes in the slot. You get the 2 outside guys healthy. Then I think we're talking wheels up. Unfortunately, it's going to be a lot like last year, where you pick him up off waivers. With the team that drafted him isn't going to be the team that benefits from his services.
A 10-play, 77-yard drive ends in a Tyler Bass 37-yard field goal for the Buffalo Bills. Buccaneers taking over with 7:58 to go in the first quarter as they have the ball down 3-0 against Buffalo. Chris Godwin takes a end around for about 15 yards on the play. So the Buccaneers with an early first down on this drive as we move forward here. Going to the Twitch channel right now, Priceless Pigeon asks, and I'm assuming he's talking about Aaron Jones here. Do you value Aaron Jones or James Conner higher rest of season? Here's my take on Aaron Jones. He got a full complement of snaps in Chicago in week 1 until he got hurt and had that hammy. Then he missed a lot of time. And the Packers were very cautious in holding him out. And even to the point where they brought him back not once but twice, not giving him a full complement of snaps. If it hasn't happened already, Doug, I'm very skeptical that it's ever going to happen that Aaron Jones gets a full complement, a full workload that we are accustomed to seeing from him over the course of the rest of the season. I don't know if it's going to happen. He's getting older. The Packers medical staff is very, very cautious, sometimes overcautious in my opinion. And to that end, I might value Conner higher. I know he's on IR right now, and I know he's like an injury waiting to happen. But when he's in there, he gets the ball. He gets the workload. I don't know if that's going to be the case for Aaron Jones the rest of the way. And that's what makes him so frustrating.
Agreed. And I'm with you. Even though the Conner's on IR, what's probably the number one thing that fantasy managers want out of their running backs besides scoring touchdowns? They want volume, right?
Yeah.
We can pretty much assume Conner's going to get his volume. And you wonder at some point. Let me ask you, being the resident Packer fan that you are, how much do you think how much do you think the absence of David Bakhtiari is playing a role in this?
You know, it's really weird because they have another All-Pro that played next to David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins, and even that guy's been screwing up. Like everybody on that offensive line's been screwing up. It would be better with Bakhtiari, no doubt, no question. How significant is it? I'd like to think that it has a pretty big bearing on this offensive line because they did not. You know, what's weird about this is they didn't have Bakhtiari the majority last season, but they were able to run block. Like they were run blocking last year. This year, it's been bad. Josh Myers has been bad at center. John Runyon has kind of been hit or miss. He's always hit or miss. Zach Tom, the right tackle, I think is the one guy who's had a really good season so far. But not having Bakhtiari next to Elton Jenkins on that left side of the line, you can't help but wonder where Aaron Jones, and not so much Aaron Jones, but where A.J. Dillon would be right now if he had the luxury of those two horses in front of him. He hasn't had that this season.
Agreed.
Tyler Soto popping in, our producer tonight. Didn't John Runyon play in the early 2000s? Why, yes, he did. This is his son, JRJ, John Runyon Jr., the Michigan product who now plays for the Packers as well. But yes, good ears on that, Tyler Soto. The question from Priceless Pigeon. Hold on. Oh, go ahead, Doug. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, and Papa John Runyon, I believe, is one of the lords of discipline for the NFL right now.
He is, and a few weeks ago, he actually, I don't know if it was this year, maybe it was last year, he actually had to fine his own son, and he had to write the letter of, like, why he was being fined. It was hilarious. So the Priceless Pigeon in the chat, in the Twitch chat right now, so you would rather trade Aaron Jones and Russell Wilson for Jalen Hurts? Yes, 1,000 times yes. You make that deal. You hold on to James Conner, elite talent above everything else. You can get Jalen Hurts in that squad, or in that deal. Yeah, I'm doing that totally, 100%. The last thing I want to get to, and I know we're up against it. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. Matthew Stafford. Where do you stand on a guy like him, Doug? To have 2 targets in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua has been awesome. The running game with Kyron Williams obviously was very, very good. We'll see what happens with it going forward. But Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford are doing great work this year. Stafford, I'm pretty bullish on the remainder of the season because of Kupp and Nacua. Where do you stand on Matthew Stafford?
Okay, I'm finding myself a bit lacking in his box scores. His play has been fun. Mm-hmm. His play has actually been more than fun. Some of the throws that he's making, I don't know that he's made in a couple of years. From a real perspective, he's playing pretty well. But I look at the box scores, and I mentioned this earlier, he has fewer than 30 attempts in each of the last 2 games. I would think personally, when you're bringing a running back up, multiple running backs off the street, and you don't have faith in any of them to begin with, and you have 2 weapons in the Nacua and Kupp, and heck, let's throw in Higbee, even though they're not really using him much anymore. I personally would go back to the recipe of the 40, 35, 40, 45 attempts that they had before the last 2 games. I'm not sure why you cut the pass attempts down by a third or even a half. So I'm conflicted when I answer this because I think he's playing real quarterback very well, but I'm underwhelmed in his box games.
He started off the season fantastic. He hit at least 265 yards in all 4 of his first 4 games. He has not come close to that since. 222, 226, 231. And his completion, his attempts, as you pointed out, have gone down. Only 7 touchdowns in 7 weeks. He's got 6 picks. He's chewing up the yardage. He's not been able to finish it off from a touchdown standpoint. You'd like to think those are fluky, not sticky, but maybe not. We'll find out as the season goes along. We're going to find out. Go ahead, Doug.
No, I uncovered this. I know you said you're against it. I'll make this real quick. It's somewhat related. Would you believe Cooper Kupp missed the first 4 weeks of the season, right?
Yep.
Would you believe that he's already? I think he's 1 behind Nakua in terms of red zone targets. I think it's 4-3.
Jesus, that's insane. I mean, the numbers that the Rams have put up this year with Nakua and Kupp, like they're like team anomaly with everything going on there. It's been crazy. Yeah. What's also crazy is the Buccaneers ended up missing a field goal here to try to tie it up. The Buffalo Bills are going to take over with 5 minutes and 6 seconds to go. They're going to get the ball at their own 31-yard line as we move forward in that game. We're moving forward in the show. We're going to step out for our final break. When we come back, start and sit questions. Yours are answered here tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about Joe Burrow. We're going to talk about Cole Kmet, Michael Mayer, David Njoku. The list goes on and on. He's Doug Orth from FF Today. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour comes into the home stretch. High Stakes Fantasy Football Show comes into the home stretch right here on the BSN next.
From the Hometown Hero series, Zach Parise.
That is a very nice card, and that's one I'm probably going to have to organize a little trade ski with you, because I would actually like that card.
I mean, you got downtown Newark in the background. I mean, that Newark has never looked so good.
No, it is not.
We'll put that back up on the screen. I just want to have a penny sleeve ready, and yes, we can absolutely work out a little trade ski for that, because that belongs in a Devil fans collection right there.
I'll trade you the Braden Schneider rookie card for it.
Done.
There we go. The first card-for-card trade on Rip and Riff history. And it was that easy.
It was that easy. That's because, you know what? Because neither one of us are jerks. And it's the same thing when we try and do fantasy trades. Like, we don't try and screw each other. We have conversations. If there's a fit, there's a fit. If it's not, it's not. We don't try and, take the other one over the barrel. So there you go. In a penny sleeve. Hometown hero, Zach Parise. He was among the league's most productive goal scorers in 06-07 and followed up with a terrific regular season with an even more impressive postseason. And then they talk about what he did in the first round series against Tampa Bay that year. So that's off to the side for you.
That's true. And, if this is it for his career, he had a hell of a career.
He did.
Hopefully he comes back one more year with the Islanders, but if he doesn't, hell of a run.
BSN viewers, let me tell you a little bit about the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. You can get it right now, unlock all the content for all sports, including annual draft guides. You get one-on-one expert access in the Discord. You can sync up your leagues to analyze matchups and trends in your specific leagues. The lineup generator is integrated with Fanjections, daily rankings, weekly rankings, the value ball, position coaches, waiver wire, ownership percentages, projections, stats, and tools. You can build better lineups. That's guaranteed. Get access to everything Fantasy Alarm offers all year long. Go to fantasyalarm.com/win, fantasyalarm.com/win. Speaking of winning, I'm talking with a guy who's got more than 2 decades plus of high-stakes leagues. Never had a losing season. Unbelievable stuff here from Doug Orth, at Doug Orth on the X. Check out all his work at fftoday.com. Doug joining me tonight as we talking a little bit about some lineup advice for Week 8, and we'll throw these at you to see where you stand on this. Interesting thing going on at running back this week. Javonte Williams, who's been fighting off Jaleel McLaughlin, and you still have Samaje Perine gumming up the works there. Javonte Williams stays at home, to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you think about Gus Edwards going out into the desert to take on the Arizona Cardinals. You can only play one of these. Let's assume FFPC, full PPR scoring for these running backs. Is that enough for you to say Javonte Williams is my guy over Gus Edwards? How do you rule on this stuff?
I hate to be a prisoner of the moment and all that jazz. I would play Gus here. Simply, P. Ryan's getting most of the third down work, I believe. I think he's getting most of the two-minute work. I think back to what happened the first time these two teams played together in Kansas City, and it was a split back, pretty much a split backfield between McLaughlin and Williams at that point. I think moving forward, they're going to play it week by week, and if they think that Williams is running hot, he might get 2, 3, 5 more carries than McLaughlin. But I think between those two, I would play the matchup every week, and this week I think Baltimore's going to play from ahead the whole time, and I think they're going to be able to rely on Gus for 15 carries if they want to go there. And I would bet a touchdown I would bet on the touchdown more for him than I would for Williams.
And obviously, Justice Hill isn't affecting your Gus Edwards selection a whole lot, right?
To a degree, I mean they're both technically in committees.
Right.
I honestly, since we're on the topic of the Ravens, I'm loving Keaton Mitchell moving forward, but we needed to get him healthy. This week, though, I'm going Edwards over Williams and not thinking too much value.
Moving forward to the wide receiver position, we touched on Rashee Rice here earlier in the broadcast. Would you be starting him over Marquise Brown? We already mentioned Rashee Rice playing against the Denver Broncos. Marquise Brown taking on the Ravens at home. Which would you be playing? I know you're bullish on Rice this week. Are you bullish enough to play him over Marquise Brown?
Yeah. No, I would play Brown. I believe in the target share and the consistency in which he's going to. The consistency in which he puts up 10 targets and the likelihood that he'll do that in this game as well. And then we have the whole revenge game narrative, right? Because we care about that. But, yeah, Brown over Rice for me there, yeah.
Okay. All right. And I'm with you on this, by the way. Like, I think Brown is the smart play over Rashee Rice. Let's get into tight ends here. Cole Kmet and Michael Mayer. Cole Kmet is a player that is, I don't know, probably number 2 on his team as far as target options go. Michael Mayer, a distant 3rd at best, probably 4th behind Jacobs here. To me, like, matchups be damned. I'm going to play Kmet over Mayer this week. I just trust him getting the ball more. Michael Mayer, it seems like they want to make a big deal out of getting him involved early in games. But the last couple of games, that's petered out after the end of the first quarter. We don't really see a whole lot of Mayer after that.
You're right. Yeah, just for the reasons that you said. Because I found myself, when you were at first asking that question, I was leaning toward Mayer, given what I think the game script is going to be. But I'll slightly lean toward Kmet there. Yeah.
Kmet is the lean here as the Bills have it 4th and goal from the 1-yard line. We'll see what they do here. A shovel pass to Dalton Kincaid up the middle on 2nd down. Kincaid fell just short of the goal line here, and Latavius Murray got a no gainer up the middle on 3rd and goal. So it is 4th and goal from the 1, and that will complete the first quarter. They'll be coming back with the second quarter in a couple of minutes here. Khalil Shakir, the story of this game so far, Doug Orth, 4 catches for 69 yards in the first quarter alone. That puts him on pace to put some Buffalo receiving records in jeopardy tonight if he keeps up this pace. Could be a 16 catch for 270-plus yard performance tonight. We'll be keeping our eyes on that as it goes on. Joe Burrow or C.J. Stroud? I made the point of, on one of my other shows, I think you can make a case for starting Stroud this week against the Panthers over Joe Burrow, who has to take on the 49ers this week. Am I strong enough to do it in real life? Probably not. But I think you can make the case for Stroud over Burrow here.
If I have to start one of the two, I'm not complaining, or I'm not expecting a lot out of either one of them, but I'm not. I feel confident that both of them are going to give me 14, 15 points. But Carolina's been actually pretty good at shutting down receivers, and by extension, pretty good at shutting them down or slowing down quarterbacks. So I'll go. Yeah, I would lean more toward Burrow, but I'm not heavily convinced either way that this is not going to be a ceiling game for Burrow, and it's certainly not going to be one for Stroud.
There is some steam building up for Chuba Hubbard, who we've talked about throughout the program tonight. I couldn't do this, but I certainly wouldn't fault somebody for doing it if they're strong in their convictions on starting Chuba Hubbard over DeAndre Hopkins for the Titans. Hopkins, who's been getting a lot of targets. I mean, he's been putting up. If he's not dominating every week, at least he's giving you something. Hubbard over Hopkins this week. Would you be able to do that, Doug, or are you still rolling with Hopkins here? And I should mention this too. Hopkins is at home against the Falcons. Obviously, Hubbard taking on the Texans.
You're talking about two guys I have no exposure to. Wow. I would burn the midnight oil on that one, but man, first impression, my gut says Hubbard, and I don't like it. But new quarterback, you just don't know what's Levis have, and I could say that with basically any non-top 5 overall quarterback. You just don't know. So you're talking about a game where Levis may not. If Tennessee gets ahead and stays ahead, they may struggle to put up 20 passes. Conversely, they might fall behind, and Levis might throw 40 times and run 10. Who knows? But
right.
I think I told you I think it's going to be a rock fight, and I wouldn't want to project any receiver in that game.
Do you think Derrick Henry ends up getting moved at the trade deadline this year, or does he stay in Tennessee?
Okay, I have to look at everything from a personal fantasy point of view, and I want that for my Tajay Spears exposures. Yes, so he's absolutely getting moved.
Bill, go ahead.
But no, there are some players that you hope stay with the same franchise for the entire career, and I would be. What are they going to get for him? A 3rd or 4th round pick? What do you think? Because I don't think it's. And at that point, why are you moving him? So I think he stays.
The 4th down pass is broken up. It was a pass to Dalton Kincaid on a little out route right at the goal line. Buccaneers break it up. Tampa takes over from their own 1. Still 3-0 with 14:53 to go in the first quarter there. So disappointing for Kincaid owners to not get that tutty there. Let's move forward here. Romeo Doubs taking on the Minnesota Vikings, and then you have Jake Ferguson, the Dallas Cowboys tight end, who is battling this week. Oh, help me out on this, Doug. Who are the Cowboys playing?
Cowboys playing the Rams.
The Rams, thank you. Yes. So which one would you start here? Again, assuming FFPC tight end premium scoring, would you still be playing Ferguson over Doubs?
I can make this quick, but this is another one. So many of these questions are context related, and Christian Watson may or may not go this weekend. If he doesn't go, I'm all in on Doubs over Ferguson. If Watson is active, I probably would still go Doubs, but I'm not doing it with much conviction. So pay attention. Tune in Sunday. Find out if Watson is available. If he is, if he's not, expect 10 targets or roughly close to 10 targets for Doubs and go from there. But the problem I have with Ferguson, he's getting used so much in the red zone, and his metrics are scream. And I said this in the column today. His metrics scream at worst low end tight end 1. And with the usage he's getting in the red zone, and especially near the goal line, I have a hard time sitting him. So, but anyway, to answer question, Doubs, more than likely.
And the thing is, I was saying this, I said this during the Denver game. I'm like, I can't trust any Packers going forward until further notice. I have to see it on the field first. There's been too many clunkers here, whether it's Musgrave or Dobbs or Watson or Love or Jones or Dillon. Like, everybody has had too many clunkers this year. That said, you make a good argument sort of against Ferguson that makes me think, okay, maybe Dobbs is the play. Watson, I think, got in a full practice today. Don't quote me on that. I thought he did. I could be wrong on that. But if he's getting a full practice in on Thursday, certainly he probably should go on Sunday. Be watching the practice reports tomorrow to find out what's going on in Green Bay before you have to make that decision, Dobbs versus Ferguson. Last one I want to get to tonight, the Darrell Henderson-led backfield of the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Dallas Cowboys this week. Would you be playing Henderson over David Njoku, a player that is going to be catching passes from P.J. Walker in Seattle this week?
It's week 8, right?
Week 8.
This is where we're at in week 8.
It's week 8 going on week 34, essentially.
Yeah. My sleep schedule would tell me it's week 34. So no, Darrell Henderson. Njoku, and this is I had a lot of Njoku, but I don't like what's going on in Cleveland. I don't like how they're using basically every player in that offense. I think I could go on. I don't like Elijah Mitchell is not just a short route guy. Amari Cooper, I think, has the highest ADOT he's ever had. He's more than just a deep guy. Njoku, he can stretch the seam. They're not doing that with him. I don't know what the plan there is in Cleveland, but anyway, I'm not going to use the stage to complain about Cleveland. So,
no, feel free. Go ahead. Whatever you want to complain about, you can. That's what's so great about this show. We get 2 hours to complain about stuff, Doug.
But yeah, Darrell Henderson, and the thing I would be leery about, and I've said this on multiple platforms. People need to at least respect the fact that the possibility Myles Gaskin is going to break up what people think that Rams backfield is going to be for the next 3 weeks. Does he get more than 5 touches? I don't know. But I think of the 3 available guys, Gaskin and Freeman, Henderson, I think Gaskin is the best running back of the 3. Whether or not Sean McVay sees it that way is another story.
Real quick on this last one, Chris Lewd in the YouTube chat. Christian Watson or Deontay Johnson? I just said I can't trust any Packers going forward. But with the midweek downgrade with Deontay Johnson's hamstring, I am going to say Watson here. I don't think Johnson plays at this point. If he does play, yeah, I like him over Watson.
The reason I brought up what I brought up about him, Watson, was that I read somewhere today Watson thinks he has a shot.
Right.
This weekend.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And that, by the way, that's from the player who's usually more optimistic and rather than realistic. We got to go here, Doug. I certainly appreciate it. We will continue to follow you on the X at Doug Orth. FFtoday.com is where to check out all your work. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Remember to go to myffpc.com to play in that FFPC Weekly Challenge. We are back live at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time next week for the full 2 hours leading into Thursday Night Football. Shout out to Doug Orth. Shout out to Tyler Soto. Shout out to all of you hanging out tonight. Enjoy the game. I'll see you in the Better Cast. The Best of the Better Sports Network is up next.